All right, everybody. Here is the demonstration on how to create a slab and then turn that slab into a cylinder for your textured slab mug. First, start with the block of clay and peel the plastic back a little bit around the base, and then slice off about 1 to 1.5 inches thickness of clay off the top of it. Once you have that, wrap your bag back up around your clay and put that out of the way. Slowly start to pound this out with the palm of your hand, and then flip it each time you make a pass over the surface. Don't forget to flip it each time. And then, after a little bit of time doing that, you can start to actually slap the clay down onto the table and start to stretch it in one direction. And you'll start to see the slab actually stretching with that motion of kind of throwing your hand towards yourself and letting go of the clay. Okay, and then you're going to measure it very precisely with these sticks on both sides of the clay. You're going to use a rolling pin, and you're going to roll out the clay till you get to the point where it's the same thickness as those sticks on both sides of the clay slab. So a couple passes and then flip it every time. Couple passes with the rolling pin, flip it. Rolling pin, and then flip it again. And then when you get really close to the right thickness, you can remove a little bit of the clay on both the top and the bottom, as long as it's still big enough for your stencil or your template over there that you made earlier. Take that clay that you don't need, put some water on it, and put it away in the bag so it doesn't dry out, and you can use it for something later, probably the base or something like that. I'm going to do one more pass, make sure it's the exact thickness as those sticks, just a little bit more stretching going on, and then I'm going to lift it off, the sticks out of the way, and then I'm going to start to clean up the surface a little bit. I want to get rid of all the texture from the canvas, and so I'm going to wipe it with a damp sponge, and then I'm going to rib the surface to compress the clay and smooth it out. It's strengthening the surface wall, and it's going to make the clay stretch a little bit better when you start to bend this into the actual shape you need to use for your cylinder. So take a couple passes with the rib till it's nice and smooth and compressed. Then you're going to be careful about flipping it over and doing the exact same thing on the other side. So take the sponge again, wipe it clean a little bit of water, not a lot, and then take your metal rib and start to compress the clay and slowly smooth it out. So there's no creases or cracks or any kind of texture from the actual canvas. After that, you're going to start to plan for the actual shape that you're going to make your cylinder out of. So take your stencil, and you want to make sure you measure it. And I'm going to turn this slab sideways so I can kind of readjust and align what I need to align here. And so there's a big enough slab for my final stencil size. Now I'm going to start using some texture designs and start pressing this into the clay and start kind of working around kind of an abstract maybe design. So nothing's going to be exactly centered, and I'm going to slowly kind of just work this surface and press this design into the clay with the palm of my hand first, and then I'm going to try to use this little rolling pin that you see on the left and slowly kind of roll it out from the middle out to the edges. And then when I do this, I want to check to see if I've got the right depth. So I can lift one side and see if I've done enough, and if I like it, I can start pulling the whole thing off. If I don't like it and I don't pull it all the way off, I can still realign it, and I can push down a little harder before I completely remove it. Then I take a rolling stamp that has a textured design, and I'm just going to go kind of abstract on that side too, and that's going to be my guide for my actual cylinder. Now I'm going to adjust where I want to cut this. I know exactly how big I need it to be, but now I'm just going to take my needle tool and just slice around the border of the paper stencil or template that I made. Pile up the excess clay that you don't need so you can save it for later. Make sure you don't let it dry out. Okay, and now you have your slab to the exact size that you want, and I'm going to release it from the canvas a little bit, and now I'm going to get ready to cut the edges so I can combine these two pieces together, or these two edges together. So that's a 45-degree cut, and I just slice it right down the side, and then I'm going to flip the whole piece over, and I'm going to do the exact same cut at the exact same spot so that I have two lines or two edges that are parallel with each other when you look at it from the top or the bottom edge. So those are going to be my parts where I actually overlap. I'm checking the height, or I'm checking the other side to make sure I have the top and the bottom the way I want it. And then I'm just going to compress and smooth out the rim a little bit before I do any kind of connection with the actual walls. I'm flattening that down because that's going to be my lip of my actual mug, and I want that to be a little bit thinner than the rest of the slab so it doesn't just look like a slab tube. It's going to have a little more refined edge. Take your wire brush, score in a crisscross fashion all the way up and down the side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side while it's still flat. It's a little bit easier to do it this way, and instead of doing it when it's on its vertical edge, then I know I have a pretty good scored surface. And I'm just kind of testing to make sure it's in the right way. Flip it over again so I have the texture on the outside, and then I slowly and carefully start to bend the clay. It's very soft, so you have to be gentle, really gentle with this, because you don't want to leave your finger marks in the clay. And so I'm just testing it out. I want to test out the connection, see how it looks, and then I'm going to slowly and carefully kind of plan the shape a little bit more, and then I'm going to pull it back apart. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit of slip up the wall on that seam. Dab it on there. Doesn't need to be a ton of it. Just needs to be enough to cover, because you're working with really soft clay, almost clay that's straight out of the bag. And then I'm going to very carefully join the two edges together. Be very careful and very light with your pressure. You don't want to crush your clay, and you don't want it to turn into a flat, thin spot somewhere. So I'm working from the middle up towards each edge, and then I'm going to flip it over and do it again, and just keep looking at and making sure I really focus on a good connection on that seam, because I don't want that to come apart later. Take the excess clay, put it back where it belongs, back in the bag. And then I'm just going to keep working on that seam, and then keeping my eye on the shape as well. Kind of blend things in a little bit better, get my thumb down in on the inside, and start to actually look at the situation I've got down below and make sure the shape is the way I want it to be. Now I'm going to take a little bit of water and smooth it out a little bit more. Make sure I blend it really well, especially up on that top lip. I want it to look nice and uniform throughout. And I keep checking the circle kind of shape that I'm looking for in this initial part. After that, just kind of clean off your tools and clean out your brush from your slip, and let that firm up in a bag overnight. All right, thanks. Good luck.